In this video, I'm going to be discussing well-calibrated thinking in regards to perception, action, and behavior. And I'm going to be defining more well-calibrated in regards to its definition and its philosophizing in regards to specific mental representations that are bound to the dynamic mind, and specifically discuss the mind-body connection, which is, as a must, good enough and necessary conditions to be able to actually meaningfully discuss well-calibrated processes at all. If you think of your smartphone device, when you're trying to calibrate certain settings, it actually requires us to engage direct perception with action and behavior, and you couldn't calibrate anything otherwise. And this is why individuals who are philosophizing on the psychology of the mind and also the mind-body connection tend to be the best individuals to be able to discuss well-calibrated at all, and individuals who are, say, in the cognitive sciences or computer sciences aren't necessarily the best fit. And they tend to also be lacking certain terms that are important in regards to both philosophy and psychology, that philosophers and some psychologists have greater access to knowledge and are better able to discuss calibrations of thinking in regards to specific perception, action, behavior apparatuses that are communicative and connective of our behaviors and certain agency processes that require us to calibrate, and which must, as a must, good enough and necessarily condition, start with causations from direct perception. There's just no way of getting around that, right? Because all calibrations pertains to cognitions that are interacting with the physical surrounds and are bound to the self and surrounds. And you just can't escape that in terms of well-calibrated processes, because you have to connect the mental representation to the surrounds and what the subject matter is in the surrounds, and then also to the immaterial or material meaningful information that's associated to that subject matter, and then ensure that they're connective and that they're not loosely configured, but that they're more well-defined in their configuration so that they're actually calibrated, right? And that the meaningful information that's flowing through cause and effect relationships that, as a must, constitute knowledge, that meaningful information constitute knowledge in regards to specific properties and aesthetic properties of meaningful information, that we primarily derive meaning prior to meaningful information, because we don't actually have access to knowledge regarding meaningful information unless we creatively engage a meaning process that allows us to construct knowledge constitutions that constitute knowledge and meaning interpretations, which are, as a must, good enough and necessary to constitute well-calibrated processes of any kind, and that are also important for meaningful learning, and learning that is actually effective rather than ineffective and meaningless and arbitrary. And say, like, you're engaging in a reading process and you're reading about information. When you're reading about information, it's important to understand that when you're actively reading and you're trying to connect or calibrate the subject matter of meaningful interpretations in regards to the processing of specific subject matter categories, the passive reader who's just kind of looking at the words and moving through at a really fast rate but not actually meaningfully interpreting it and processing the auditory semantic processes of meaningful information that would flow through consciousness, right, in these streams of consciousness, and actually allowing those terms to be verbalized internally within our intrinsic inner mentalizing processes of cognition and emotion, meaningful emotion in particular, we can start to elaborate and develop meaningful interpretations that, if you were to say test this individual on a long response, they would be able to provide a lot more connective, high quality details specific to well-defined terms rather than vague terms that they're more better at, say, recalling or matching to specific recognitions of information, and don't have a deeper realization of what that actually means, where individuals who actually are engaging meaningfully in a reading process, and creatively so, can elaborate. And certainly as they develop better comprehension skills, they're more able to do this actively rather than passively during a reading process. So they can even sometimes write into the lines, not just read between the lines, but write into the lines, create notes, mental notes of cognition that can meaningfully store information as they're reading and processing, as if they're in a communication with that writer of that text, and can tap into more deeply the meaningful contents of that information. And that's all I wanted to say for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.